Okay, hi everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you to our amazing speakers for joining. We have some participants online, and we have the speakers and the panelists ready and eager for the session. You are welcome to this webinar titled Building a Stronger Democracy, Youth Technology and Political Engagement in Africa. Can everyone hear me? Can you confirm that you hear me loud and clear before I continue?
Yes, you are clear.
Okay, awesome. So again, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this webinar titled Building a Stronger Democracy, Youth, Technology, and Political Engagement. I will go ahead to introduce myself and we will go right into the program. But before I do that, this webinar is co-hosted by the African Union Youth Office of the Youth Envoy and in partnership with the Data for Governance Alliance projects. My name is Sabina Foba. I am from Cameroon. I am based in Addis Ababa. I work with the African Union Youth Envoy as a digital innovations and tech fellow. What that means is I design products and services that improves the delivery of the African Union using innovation and technology. But you're not here to hear about me, so we're going to get straight into it. I'm really excited, as you can tell, about this conversation because I think it's crucial. We're going to explore the intersection of, technology and democracy, and see how together we can advance the delivery of the African Union's Agenda 2063. We are glad to see so many young people who have joined together with various institutions, public civil society organizations, and just everyone. Our agenda is very straightforward. We have a very exciting lineup of speakers. We're going to have a presentation of key information, from the D4G team, and we're going to have a very elaborate question and answer session. Before we dive right into our program, a few house rules are, since we are here on a webinar versus seminar, would like to see your reactions. You could share your reactions in the chat box. You can send a thumbs up. My favorite emoji is a 100% emoji, so we know that you're engaging with in the conversation, as well as share your thoughts and your remarks and questions in the chat box, and we're going to revisit this towards the end of the program. To kick off the conversation, we'll invite Mr. Paul Aborampa Mensah, who is the lead for the D4G, the Data for Governance project in West Africa, to tell us more about the program and how it fits into the African Union's Agenda 2063. Over to you, Mr. Paul.
Very much, Sabina. And let me also take the opportunity to say good morning to our panelists this morning and all our listeners. Yeah, so the Data for Governance Alliance is a deepening of the relationship between the Afrobarometer and its core partners in Africa. As we know, the Afrobarometer has been leading citizens' perception survey on the continent for almost 9 rounds now, almost 18 years now. And it so happened that they added another stream of work to also support the aspiration of the African Union towards the Agenda 2063. So in 2020, we joined hands, picked some of the core partners, including the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, based in West Africa, Ghana, the Institute for Democratic Studies, Institute for Development Studies in the Eastern Africa, Kenya, at the University of Nairobi, then the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation in South Africa, then added the Laos Africa, when you mention the name Laws Africa, you know what their focus is. So our major aim is to use data to inform how Pan-African civil society organizations, students, and our youth can also work to collaborate and participate in the work of the African Union organs to ensure that together we are all able to achieve the Agenda 2063 that we want. So the Data for Governance Alliance work is based on 4 pillars. The first one is, of course, data collection, analysis, and sharing. So the AB, Afrobarometer, takes data on all sectors of the economy in Africa: corruption, agriculture, migration, youth development and engagement, women's role, governance, democracy issue. Then we make them available for use. The second stream that we added is the work being done by the Laws of Africa. So the Laws of Africa is trying to gather protocols, laws, constitutive acts of all the African Union organs, digitize them and save them online, so it will be readily accessible to users. You know, so when we pick the Office of the Youth Envoy, what was the mandate? How does the office achieve its mandate? All these things are digitized. What is the latest decision made by the courts on human rights? What is the role of the Commission on Welfare of Child and Women doing? All these laws and protocols are digitized and uploaded on free access to everybody who wants to. I think my colleague Inge will speak more about it today. And the third stream is, of course, you cannot keep collecting data and don't make them available for the users. So we've added capacity enhancements as to how to access the AB data and use it. So we have occasional physical training called summer schools that were organized for Pan-African Civil Society organized students and everybody. And fortunately, because of this project, the Data for Governance Alliance, last year, we added participants from the AGA organs to also participate to be, know the use of the data. Then this year, we are going to do the same thing with a very rule for the AGA organ members to bring their participants also to the summer school. Aside the summer school, we organize specific training also for other civil society organizations. The first one for this year is happening in Accra here on 9th and 10th. We'll do same in South Africa, we'll do same. And so that's what we do. Then the last one we do is the convenings. That's what we are doing today. So we partner with the AGA organs to organize webinars or physical events for us to engage, create the platform for engagements. We did the first one with the APRM last 2 months. Because the APRM is 20 years this year, they chose their team, the APRM, and they go forward. So we had a very successful webinar, opened the lines for people to ask questions. Then the APRM also told the participant how they can participate in their activities in their future events. So this is exactly what the Data for Governance Alliance seeks to do. And the activities planned this year include quarterly webinars. And this is the second time we are in talk with the courts and other organs to do the third and the fourth one. We also plan our usual yearly physical meetings, and we plan with the AGA Secretariat. So we will see the topic that will be chosen for this year. So in short, this is what the Data for Governance Alliance stands for.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that summary of the amazing and incredible work that you're doing. You know, we had the opportunity to meet sometime last year, and I remember vividly after, going through the training and, understanding the amazing things that you're doing, and the fact that the data that you collect is available, readily available to everybody. I was so shocked. I thought it was amazing, because one of the challenges that we face is we don't have hard facts. We don't have facts about what's happening in the region. And it's amazing that you're doing all of this and you're providing it for free. Good job. As we progress into the conversation, I want to encourage all of our participants to, if you are a Twitter bird as I am, to live tweet and use the hashtag Tech4Gov. Tech4 is the digit, Tech4Gov, and share your impressions of the webinar. You can invite your followers to join us and tag the official accounts of the Office of the Youth Envoy, as well as the Data for Governance Alliance project, and we will find your comment, and retweet. Thank you very much. We're moving into our conversation. I do not know if Henry has managed to join us. Yes, I see Henry. Henry Munangatire is a communications specialist. He is an expert in public affairs, but even more interestingly, Henry is the chief of staff in the office of the African Union Youth Envoy, and he's going to take the mic now to tell us exactly what the office of the Youth Envoy is about and just what the office has been doing in the past few years. Over to you, Henry.
Thank you, Sabina. Thank you, and thank you to everybody. It's great to be here, and I think the most important thing is the Office of the Youth Envoy has a platform where we really convene to be the voice of the young people on the continent. And I'm privileged to work with a phenomenal group of young people, as well as assisting the Youth Envoy in her mandate to ensure that she reaches every single part of the African continent. So my role today is mainly to introduce her and to just give a slight overview, a teaser of what is to come, while she will guide you into the history, where the office is and the future of the office. So I think in introducing Chido, I'll say that one of the most phenomenal things is that she really, at the heart of it, has a passion for what she does. And that passion was founded in doing it, being involved in youth affairs, even as a professional, which is something she'll get on to tell you about how she got into all of this. It was really her passion. So now seeing her do this and assisting her, she's really doing exactly what she loves the most to do. So with that in mind, also in terms of the office, I think what is interesting is we are touching on specific areas. Specifically, Chido's mandate is around climate change and humanitarian issues. It's around social development, and then also around economic development issues. So the office is finding itself working and forging with young people around the continent in those specific sectors, be it in business, be it in social enterprise, and even be it in initiatives such as climate change and ending modern slavery. So with that in mind, I think I'll ask Chido to come on in a minute or so. But just before that, I think it's also important to mention that one of the highlights of the office right now is a concept which Chido will go into more detail on, known as the listening tours, which are going to be basically tours where Chido will go and meet different youth across the continent. But without much further ado, Sabina, I'll hand over to you, and I think Chido will come on in a moment.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thanks for the amazing work that you're doing. Supporting the Youth Envoy in her ambitious mandate. I think you have said pretty much summarized the activities of the Office of the Youth Envoy, but as mentioned, would like to hear from the Youth Envoy herself. The Youth Envoy was appointed by the African Union Chairperson in 2021 to front the voice of over 870 million young people thereabout, advocating for them in various sectors. And fun facts, she is the youngest diplomat on the cabinet of the African Union Chairperson. So we are talking about Her Excellency Chido Pemba. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sabina, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening and good morning, depending on which part of the continent you are in or which part of the world you're in. I'm currently in the USA, where we've just concluded on the United Nations Youth ECOSOC Forum, where I was representing the voices of the youth. So just to briefly touch on the Office of the Youth Envoy, as you know, we're very much excited as well to hear from our panelists. So I'll just speak briefly, just to give an overview in terms of how this office started and where we are at the moment, because we tend to think that everyone is aware what exactly is Office of the Youth Envoy, but that's usually not the case. So I think I'll just give a summary so people have an idea. So as previously mentioned, I was appointed by His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed into his cabinet as the Youth Envoy. And really, the position came about to ensure that that we have more young people being part of the decision-making body of the African Union and at executive level too, and ensuring that your voices are fully represented in that regard, and also to champion the African Union Youth Charter. So now, as I'm, just 1 year into office, just slightly after 1 year into office, last year, really, we spent most of our time setting the foundation of the office. As you're aware, prior to my appointment, we had the first youth envoy, Aya Chepi, who did a wonderful job as well in setting the foundation for the office. And she started off within this role as a volunteer, but through lobbying, this became a full-time role within the structures of the AU and now sitting at the AU Commission. So when I came in, I've been sitting within the office in Addis Ababa, and we had to continue with this work in, passing on the baton and setting this foundation. As you're aware, we had so many challenges, including the vacuum and the gap in between the second appointment, as well as COVID-19. So now most of the efforts really went into setting this foundation, including for lobbying, for the office to have its own specific center in terms of budgeting, lobbying for that as well. And now in the process of the institutionalization of the office, which we will be presenting at our upcoming STC, which is the Steering Technical Committee of the Ministers of Youth, Sports, Arts and Culture. And we're quite excited about this because this is the very first time that they will be meeting in 4 years' time. And it's something as well we have been lobbying for because, ultimately what we would like are decisions that are made at policy level to ensure that, we really zone in on change and, nationalize and domesticate our policies. So as we're preparing for this as well, it's also very important, even when we get to the Q&A, just to hear some comments in terms of, what would you propose and what do you see as fit as, being the policies within the context of your countries and how you ought to be represented in such meetings where we lobby and advocate for various policies, but specifically embedded into the African Union Youth Charter, which I do hope you have an opportunity to research and to go through as well within the articles that are embedded in it. So, just to give that summary within the foundation of setting the foundation of the office, I thought it was very important really to first hear from the voices of the youth themselves in terms of what would you propose to be included as part of the mandate of the youth envoy? What would you propose to be included as part of our strategy? So as a result of that, last year we embarked on a listening tour. And really the idea of the listening tour took a three-way model. And this looked at firstly youth engagement, where we embarked on youth town hall meetings in various countries that we visited. But we did not just limit this to just countries in Africa. We also looked at our young people in the diaspora that I also have the opportunity to represent. And within this context of the youth town hall meeting, we were going through various topics that came as a result of our initial launch of our survey and what young people had said on the forefront they would like to be addressed, such as climate change, humanitarian action, democratic governance, youth, peace and security, to name a few. And the second part of this listening tour really focused on community engagements. Again, because it's very important that as I'm representing the youth, we also look at the marginalized community and the vulnerable groups that do not necessarily have access to internet or might not be able to receive this information. So within the context of the community engagements, we had the opportunity through the office and my team to visit a number of marginalized communities just to share more information about Agenda 2063, about the African Union, and also to hear from young people the challenges they've been faced with. To give an example, when I was in Abuja, we went to visit Okudi district and had an opportunity really to sit down with young people that have been faced with challenges in terms of access to education, especially post-COVID-19. And that also then became part of our Transforming Education Africa Youth Declaration that I had an opportunity to present to our AU member states. And currently within this year of 2023 is now, looking at how we would domesticate and nationalize this for the recommendations that have come from young people on education. So the final part of this listening tour has also looked at policy and political engagements. I mean, as a political appointee of the chairperson, it's very important as well that we have buy-in from our AU member states, that they really zone in and take young people on the forefront, where we look at less speeches and more concrete action. So this was just to, raise more awareness of the office, where we are, as well as really give, feedback on what we've heard from on the ground from young people. again, due to the demand of the listening tours, and also to ensure that we really make sure that this reaches a number of countries across the continent and beyond, we will be continuing with the listening tours, and we're very excited. Just the next week, we will be going to Madagascar for a very first listening tour for the year of 2023. Just so as we're doing our work, first of all, to raise more awareness, and secondly, to get to hear from the young people themselves in terms of, feedback on the mandate and what we've been doing, at the moment. Lastly, I would like to touch on, just within the context of the office, the importance of having young people's voices on the global platform, not just limiting ourselves in the context of Africa, but also ensuring that when you look at global inequalities, we have young people really contributing to the discussions. So, as a result of this, we've had the privilege through the office, as well as, advocating for more youth delegations at meetings such as COP27, the Commonwealth meeting, the United Nations General Assembly, to name a few, but to also ensure, also at the recently concluded United Nations Youth ECOSOC Forum, just to also ensure that, in as much as we meet on the continent and within the context of our AU meetings, we also have the youth voice, the African youth voice, meeting and contributing to discussions and decision making on the global platform, because we do deserve to be there too. So that's just a summary. I will just conclude here with the summary, and in just a few minutes time, just touch on the webinar that we have today. First of all, thanking our panelists, thanking our co-organizers, and of course, thanking the young people that have joined us today and have really made this, a success. And I look forward to us having discussions. It's a very safe space, not too formal, but really having conversations. I believe this is also an opportunity for us to learn from one another and stand in solidarity as young people. When you look at Aspiration 6 of Agenda 2063, it talks about an Africa whose development shall rely on the potential of its people, especially its youth. Therefore, it's very important that we really zone in on the potential that young people bring, and we bring their voices to the table. So, today, as we seem to be tackling various yet critical issues, when we look holistically, we may find answers to emerging issues such as democracy, youth, technology, and political engagement that are all vital aspects of sustainable growth and development of the continent, with young people being at the core of this. And, I think our first point of call when discussing youth political participation in Africa are the frameworks that mandate all African countries to ensure that young people are meaningfully engaged in the development agenda. And, besides the Agenda 2063 and the Aspiration 6 I've spoken about, it's really important that we look at the African Union Youth Charter. Now, within the African Union Youth Charter, this treaty was endorsed by our head of states in 2006 in Banjul. And out of the 55 member states, currently we have 39 member states that have signed and ratified on the Youth Charter. And now part of my role is to advocate for more countries to sign onto the charter that was agreed on. And just recently at our concluded AU head of state meeting that happened in February, we saw Burundi coming on board and depositing the African Union Youth Charter. But now, having said that, one thing we've also been challenging is that, this Youth Charter was signed in 2006. And as you all know, we're now in 2023. And I believe it's very important that, we get to a point where we can review this charter and ensure that what is embedded in the charter also looks at where we are now in the world, given that, it's over 13 years. And most importantly, so a mechanism to ensure the review, and monitoring and evaluation in terms of how it's been implemented across the countries that have signed onto this charter. So I'll stop here for now, but just to thank you, Redi, and, of course, as we look forward to hear from, our diverse speakers that will touch on different elements and contexts of, democratic governance, which is very important as well, like what is data saying, as well as, how can young people participate in the electoral processes? What is the role of civil society? And how can we look at this in a way that we can really build on all our efforts to build a strong continent with young people on the forefront in the context of democratic governance. So thank you once again for joining in, and I really look forward to the conversations to follow and even beyond as we continue to really build the Africa that we want in solidarity and together as young people that make up the now and the future of Africa. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chido, as always for inspiring the rest of us. And it seems you have a very ambitious mandate. We wish you all the best. You have our support, and we are here for you always. If you're just joining us, we are currently at the webinar Building a Stronger Democracy, Youth, Technology and Political Engagement, hosted by the African Union Office of the Youth Envoy and the Data for Governance Alliance projects. We have heard from Mr. Paul, who is a project leader for the project in West Africa. We've heard from Henry, who is the Chief of Staff in the Office of the Youth Envoy. We've heard from the Youth Envoy herself. And now we are moving into listening to more from subject matter experts. And now we are going to hear from a rising star, a young person who is, very relevant, not just in the African context, but globally. He's using technology in a very innovative way to drive democracy. And very recently, his startup was awarded the best startup in democracy affirming, best in democracy affirming startup in Africa and the top 5 worldwide. I'm talking about no other person but Oswald Wieder. Over to you, Oswald. Oswald, can you hear me?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Oswald, and I'm very happy to be in the presence of very prominent people as yourselves and to share some of the work that we are doing at Floodgates. And I see a few familiar faces, and hopefully I offer all respects to all protocol on the call. Thank you so much for inviting me and inviting my team to share our story and what we are doing in terms of using digital technology to transform and support democracy across Africa. So my company's name is Floodgates Limited, which was founded a few years ago, mainly focused on solving the big challenges that we have in Africa. And one of the things that we identified as one of the main challenges which do not support inclusion, representation, and access is the absence of verifiable identity. And it may seem like it's a minor challenge that exists in many places and it's rarely talked about. But the World Bank brought out statistics that said that there are over 1 billion people worldwide who do not have any form of verifiable identity. And 500 million of this are in Africa. And so it's a large problem across the world, but it's an even bigger problem across Africa. Now, considering that we live in the digital age and we are building technology and systems that are supposed to connect us and allow us to accelerate our development, if we are not able to identify one another and to be able to trust the people that we are dealing with and we are engaging with, or across these digital channels, it creates a very big challenge whereby we can see disinformation, issues of security breaches and identity fraud taking over. Now, this has a ripple effect as it goes on to affect financial inclusion. Credit rates in Africa are some of the highest in the world. And with some countries lending around 40%, 35% to 40% interest rates per annum, which is a very high barrier for not only the older generation, but mainly for the youth who are not able to access credit to build and to create within the world and do business as they are supposed to do. Now, one of the main causes of this is the lack of verifiable identity. So we designed a solution that allows you to identify a person from anywhere in the world, especially in Africa, and verify their identity and trust that you are dealing with the right person, and then be able to offer services to them. And then we went forward to onboard a number of government agencies and place critical services on this platform so that people who have a verified identity can then access these services. In many parts of Africa, you would have to go to a lot of places. You have to travel, sometimes go to the central, the city, the capital, to be able to access certain government services in person. But what we are working to do is to ensure that every critical government and business service is available on a platform for any person with verified identity to be able to do so. If you need to register a company as a young person, you can easily go on there and contact the Registrar General's department. If you need to submit any taxation information, access any government information, you should be able to access that from a simple platform where your identity is verified. And so this is the work that we have been doing and focusing on for the past 3 years, which earned us the award for the best democracy affirming startup in Africa out of over 200 startups that participated, 5 within the world, where we went on to represent Africa on the global stage in Washington, DC. And we were also invited to the White House to have a few discussions and deliberations. Now, this initiative is called Tech for Democracy, and it is part of President Biden's Summit for Democracy initiative, which is intended to promote democracy across the world. And these initiatives in other places have seen that technology can be a strong catalyst for democracy. And so entrepreneurs and the youth and people who are building digital technology should be supported and should be assisted to build these principles of democracy into the digital solutions that we build, so that we do not come into and live in a world where digital technology does not adhere to our democratic values. And it has a very strong capacity to affect our governance and state systems. So values like inclusion, privacy, human rights, respect for human rights, participation, access, and representation are things that we need to address using digital technology. And digital technology gives us a very strong frontier, very strong capacity to be able to address this, not only in one place, but across the continent. And one of the things that has shown how powerful digital technology has been in our particular case in integrating the African continent is our work with the Federation of African Law Students. Now, the Federation of African Law Students had a peculiar challenge, whereby with a membership of over 33,000 people across Africa in over 35 countries, needed to be coordinated in a single manner, verified with the identity credentials managed, and being able to perform payments across different countries in a central way, reach out to us. And we provided them with our technology, which allows for now so many people in different African countries on a common platform, using common payment systems, using a common identity verification system, and promoting trust in different ways. This has shown us what the future of Africa will be with the implementation of the AfCFTA, with the implementation of the Free Movement Protocol, amongst other things, using digital technology. And we are very happy to participate in ensuring that we achieve these goals in the future, and that we build the Africa that we would want to live in, using digital technology as a strong catalyst towards that goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oswald. That was very brilliant. I think my key takeaway from your very brief and crisp presentation is technology can be a strong catalyst for democracy. I totally agree, and especially bringing technology from this far-fetched ideology or concept and making services, making it available and accessible to everybody to, leverage onto for public services. I think that's very interesting. Now, I'll go back to our participants. If you are just joining, welcome. You can, share your reactions, your comments, your questions in the chat box. I've seen some already really amazing questions from Julius, Onia, from Izire, Gillen. Kindly keep your questions coming. We're going to have time to answer these questions at the end. And do not forget to live tweet and to tag the Office of the Youth Envoy and the Data for Governance Alliance. Once again, thank you, Oswald. Now, moving forward, you mentioned that your solution, the floodgates, is making technology more accessible for the delivery of public service. We've heard from you, you're a young person implementing on the ground. But what we want to hear now, we want to hear from a researcher on his perspective on the subject matter. We have Dr. Patrick Kwasi, who is an LSE, London School of Economics fellow. I thought he has a very interesting profile. Dr. Patrick has a PhD from the University of Edinburgh in African Studies, and his interests includes electoral processes, democratization, etc. But having heard from Oswald about the work that he's doing in Ghana and across the world, I assume that Ghana is the sort of a stable state, we can say that, and you have experience with work in fragile states. Now, a characteristics of a fragile state is, they have very weak institutions that they're not able to provide basic needs for their citizens, especially the young people. And the implications of this are obvious. We have high unemployment, we have violence, coup d'etats, case in points, countries in West Africa. Now we have Sudan that we once thought was stable, is now getting to the images and the news coming out of Sudan are very horrific. It's going to be very fragile for a while. But really, what is the impression of young people? What are the implications of young people in these states towards political engagement? What recommendations do you have for us, perhaps using technology or otherwise, on how we can alleviate this challenge? Over to you, Dr. Patrick.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. We will be nuancing that view about the extent to which Ghana is either weak or not. We will be nuancing it today. But let me start off. Ladies and gentlemen, today I join you in discussing the topic of the African youth, technology, and political engagement in the context of fragility. The UNDP, the UN Population Division, says that as of 2020, Africa has been home to a youthful population with a median age of about 19.7 years. And this demographic reality presents both opportunities and challenges to the continent's sociopolitical development. One of the most significant drivers of youth participation in contemporary Africa is technology. While there is no African exceptionalism when it comes to this topic, today's discussion will focus on the role of technology in enabling or undermining the youth contribution to democratic strengthening. First, permit me to set the stage for the discussion. The definition of the following key concepts vary depending on the approach used by various information sources, but I take certain basic indicators of these concepts to come up with minimalist definitions relevant to our purpose. Youth participation refers to the active involvement of young people, whom according to the AU Charter fall within 15 to 35 age range in the political, social, economic, and cultural spheres of their societies. Today's presentation focuses on political engagement, which refers to the ways in which young people participate in the governance of their society, including through voting, advocacy, and activism. Technology refers to digital communication tools, platforms, and infrastructure that enable the processing and exchange of information and ideas. It includes mobile devices and social media. Aligning with the UNDP 2019 African Governance Report and the World Bank's 2021 Harmonized List of Fragile Situations, I deem fragile states as countries characterized by governance challenges, including weak institutions, as rightfully stated, poor service delivery, and/or social and political instability. This definition suggests that across and within space and time, different African countries can arguably be referred to as fragile settings. Finally, democracy refers to the regime type in which power is held and executed by the people, either directly or indirectly through elected representatives. It is characterized by principles such as rule of law, protection of individual rights and freedoms, accountability to citizens, free and fair elections, a vibrant civil society, an independent judiciary, and a free press. Now, let us take a historical overview of youth participation in the continent. For decades, African youth have been at the forefront of political and social movements, including the anti-colonial struggles and the fight against apartheid South Africa. However, after independence, many African countries failed to fully engage young people in the political process, leading to apathy and disengagement. This trend was exacerbated by the economic crisis and political crisis of the 1980s and 1990s, which led to widespread poverty and unemployment, especially among young people. However, in recent years, we have seen the resurgence of youth participation in Africa, driven in part by the increased availability and accessibility of technology. Today, right now, I'm about to move into some of the things Oswald pointed out during his presentation. Some argue that technology is a game changer, and rightfully so, for youth participation in the continent, leading to a techno-optimist view. Technology has enabled young people to mobilize, organize around issues that matter to them, from political and social justice to environmental concerns. It has also increased access to information and created new spaces for dialogue and collaboration, transcending geographical and political boundaries. For example, during the Arab Spring, young people in Tunisia, Egypt, and other countries used social media to organize protests and demand change. In Nigeria, the Not Too Young to Run campaign, which was supported by social media, successfully advocated for the reduction of the age limit of political candidates. Furthermore, in the COVID-19 era, digital tools have enabled young people to continue their engagement in the political process, even in the face of lockdowns and restrictions of public gatherings. Nonetheless, others argue that technology can also have debilitating effects, leading to a techno-pessimist view. Technology can be used by people, notably the youth, who research shows dominate the use of digital communication tools to spread misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, propaganda, and thereby leading to polarization and conflict. It can also be a tool for authoritarian regimes to surveil and control their citizens, limiting their freedom of expression and association. For example, in countries like Ethiopia and Tanzania, the government has shut down social media platforms during elections to prevent opposition groups from mobilizing. Additionally, not all young people have equal access to technology, thereby creating a digital divide that may deepen existing social inequalities. Now, considering the double-edged sword digital communication is, there is no gainsaying the fact that technology-induced African youth participation concurrently engenders democratic gains and reversals. Informed by the various forces that affect the African youth participation in political decision-making and lessons from elsewhere, I now put forward forces that affect youth participation with the attention of proffering solutions and recommendations for stakeholders' attempt to optimize technology-mediated youth political engagement in Africa. First, we need to ensure that technology is used as a tool of empowerment rather than a tool for disinformation and isolation. Second, provided the rapid development we constantly see in the technology space, we need to ensure that young people have access to education and resources that enable them to leverage the positive elements of technology as they engage in political activities. Third, we need to support the development and implementation of policies that enable young people, including political minorities, such as women and people with disability, to have a voice in decision making. These can involve the lowering of voting age, the prevention of arbitrary arrest of protesters and dissenters, the encouragement of youth representation in government, and the creation of youth-friendly spaces for political engagement, among others. What do all these mean for the African Union? With its adoption of the AU Charter, African Youth Charter in 2006, and from the Youth Envoy's opening remarks, the AU has recognized the critical role of the youth in the continent's development and has developed policies and programs such as Agenda 2063 and the African Union Youth Commission to enhance youth participation in governance and democratic processes. The Commission needs to ensure that its member states not only ratify its youth policies, but also implement them as rehashed by the Youth Envoy. Finally, the Commission needs to create a strong continental front aimed at ensuring a safe and responsible and inclusive environment that fosters technology-mediated youth participation and engagement, just as the European Union, through support to the European Fact-Checking Standards Network project, has done. In conclusion, the intersection of technology, youth, and political engagement in Africa is a very complex issue. While technology can be a powerful tool for promoting youth participation in politics, it is not a panacea. It is up to us to ensure that technology is used to enhance rather than undermine youth political engagement in the continent. By supporting policies that enable young people to have a voice in decision-making and creating opportunities for meaningful engagement, we can strengthen democracies in the continent. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you very much, Dr. Patrick. I think I have three takeaways from your presentation. One is that we should use technology as a tool for empowerment and not otherwise. Secondly, you recommend that we should ensure that young people have the resources that they need to engage in political engagements. And thirdly, you said we should, support and come up with policies that allow young people to engage in the spaces. And I thought that was really, in a nutshell, and emphasizing the importance of technology in this day and age, especially post-COVID. All of us saw what COVID did. And I think it was an amazing presentation. Just to share with you that the Office of the Youth Envoy, I think this was briefly mentioned by the Youth Envoy herself and Henry, the Chief of Staff. The Office of the Youth Envoy is currently very recently launched a digital skills campaign, which I think the purpose really of this campaign is to empower young people with digital skills that they need to partake, to fully and meaningfully participate in this digital economy for, democracy, for example. And so I think there's some progress being made to make sure that we are closing the digital divide. But again, we are calling on all stakeholders, we're calling on young people to, first of all, be cognizant of the fact that technology is a game changer, and also to, support the policies, to also mobilize resources to, ensure that we are fully making use of technology. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Patrick. If you're just joining us, welcome. We are exploring avenues, exploring methods of working together to, exploring the intersection of youth, of technology and political engagements on the African continent. We've heard from brilliant subject matter speakers, and we encourage you to share your remarks, share your comments in the chat box. We're going to refer to this towards the end of our conversation. Now we are going to go to a brief presentation of on-site data. We're going to hear from Afrobarometer, which is a very incredible project. They're going to share with us key information and data on what young people are seeing on the ground about certain things around democracy. We're going to call on Dominic Dryden, who is Afrobarometer Capacity Building Manager, to share this data with us. Over to you, Dominic.
Thank you so much, Sabina, for the warm welcome. As Sabina mentioned, I'll be presenting a few highlights of Afrobarometer's round 9 findings on youth technology and political engagement. I just want to give a minute to my colleague to share her screen with our presentation on it. While that is being set up, I'll just get into a brief overview of what Afrobarometer is. We are a Pan-African survey research organization that provides reliable data on the experiences, evaluations, and aspirations of African citizens, particularly focused on democracy, governance, and quality of life, but our survey topics are much broader than that too. The main goal of our organization is to give African publics a voice in policy and decision-making processes. And to date, we've completed 8 rounds of our surveys, starting in 1999, and our 9th round is currently underway. This round, we'll be targeting 39 countries across the continent. I don't, just sorry to jump in here, but I don't see our presentation. I just want to make sure that everybody can follow. Okay, great. So this map is an overview of where Afrobarometer has conducted surveys, and each color represents the round in which we started conducting surveys in that particular country. The light gray in the middle of the continent are countries that we haven't yet been able to conduct surveys in, but if the conditions in those countries improve, we'll definitely be broadening our horizons with the hope of covering the entire continent sometime soon. A brief word on our methodology. In every country that we conduct surveys in, we use a nationally representative sample of adult citizens, that is people over the age of 18. And all of our interviews are conducted face-to-face in the language of the respondent's choice. And that means, going to the most remote places of the continent to get those opinions. Moving on to our findings. Before I get into the findings, I just want to preface this presentation by saying that what I'm presenting today is really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the data that we have available. And at the end of the presentation, I'll be sharing details about our website, where you'll be able to access our data and publications which dive into many of these topics that I'll touch on today in a lot more detail. So starting with most important problems, unemployment, unsurprisingly, tops the list of the most important problems that young Africans want their government to address, followed by the management of the economy, health, education, and infrastructure. Next, moving on to educational level, young Africans are on average more educated than their elders. A majority of 18 to 35-year-olds have at least some secondary school, compared to 48% and 33% respectively of the middle and senior age group categories. While most across the continent, the findings are quite diverse. So while most of, if not all, youth in Zimbabwe, Mauritius, Cabo Verde, Gabon, and Tunisia have been to school, about half of those who live in Niger have no formal education. And this graph specifically represents youth, that's from 18 to 35. African youth are also considerably more likely than their elders to be out of work and looking for a job, unfortunately. Moving on to looking at this data by country, unemployment rates reported by young respondents range up to 67% in Angola, 60% in Botswana, and 57% in Lesotho. And we can see that this range is quite diverse as well, with only 4% in Mauritius. But consistently, African governments are also graded quite poorly in their performance in creating jobs across the 38 countries. Only 2 in 10 Africans say that their governments are doing well in meeting the needs of creating jobs. Young and older respondents offer almost an identical assessment of government's performance in this regard. When looking at support for democracy and democratic norms and trying to answer the question of whether the youth actually want democracy, we can see that the preference for democracy and rejection of authoritarian rule is high across different generations. Excuse me. It is worth noting, however, that younger Africans are slightly more opposed to one-party rule than those over the age of 55. But the opposite appears to be true for military rule, where young people are slightly less opposed than older people. Overall, though, the support for democracy is also slightly higher among older people compared to younger people. Young adults are also slightly more likely than their elders to say that they are not very satisfied or not at all satisfied with the way that democracy works in their countries. When looking at perceived corruption among various institutions, it can be seen that the youth are particularly critical of institutional corruption, with the police being at the top of the list of institutions young people perceive as being involved in corruption. When looking at trust in government and other social institutions, we can see that the youth also show considerable distrust in public institutions. One troubling sign is the low popular opposition to military intervention in politics. On average, across the 28 countries included here, only 43% agree that military should never intervene in politics, while a small majority are willing to countenance this opinion if elected leaders abuse power. In that view, the military should intervene if elected officials abuse power is more popular among the younger generations, with close to 6 in 10 of those under the age of 36 years, compared to 48% among those over the age of 56. Moving on to political participation and civic engagement. Youth are slightly less likely to be politically engaged than older citizens. The largest gaps are observed in the most fundamental forms of voice and participation, which is voting. But they also lag behind in other types of community participation and contact with their leaders, elected and building on from the previous speaker on technology use, looking at youth and digitization, young people far exceed elders when it comes to the use of the internet and digital devices. The youth are about twice as likely as those older than 55 years to own a smartphone and computers, to regularly use the internet, and to get news from social media and the internet in general. Citizens, both young and old, who have access to smartphones tend to be more likely to be critical of the quality of democratic norms that they see in their countries. For instance, they are more likely to think officials who commit crimes go unpunished, that the elections are not free and fair, and that most, if not all, of officials at the presidency are corrupt. Finally, we see a similar pattern when it comes to internet news consumption, citizens who access the news from the internet or social media are more likely to perceive official impunity, corruption at the presidency, and poor quality of elections. So if any of the data that I presented today interested you, I really want to encourage you to visit the Afrobarometer website. As I said, this was just the tip of the iceberg, and you'll be able to find a little bit more deeper analysis in our publication section, as well as being able to access our data freely using the online data analysis tool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic. That was very, very, very informative. At some point, I was going to say, hold on. You know, it was so interesting and so colorful that you want to spend time in reading and then you just go to the next slide. And I'm like, Dominic, hold on, we're still looking at this. But yeah, it just talks into how interesting it is. And there's nothing more frustrating than maybe you're working on a research paper or something and you go online to look for data you can't find. You find data, but you know, countries like Yemen and no African centric organization that is taking this in the lead. And shouts out to Afrobarometer, shouts out to Data for Governance Alliance project in the whole for, you know, doing this and putting so much resources into making sure that we have reliable data and information like this. I think moving forward, we're going to hear from a lawyer and human rights advocate who has over a decade's experience in transitional justice, human rights, and the rule of law. Mr. Andrew Songa is going to enlighten us based on the data that we've seen Dominic has presented on how young people can leverage technology to make their voices heard. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Sabina. Quite happy to be able to join this very important meeting, and also feeling very indebted to the prior panelists who have set the stage rather well for me to then come in and just discuss from the perspective of my project, which is called the Charter Project Africa, how we can utilize civic technology to leverage or enhance youth engagement in matters of democratic governance. So just a quick introduction to the Charter Project Africa. The Charter Project Africa, if you would like, can be considered as a sister project to the Data for Governance Alliance, being that we are both supported under the same European Union facility that focuses on engaging citizens more substantively on matters of democratic governance continentally and within the wider program of the African Governance Architecture Support Program. The Charter Project Africa is in fact a 6-member consortium that is focused on driving citizen engagement in the implementation of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance through the use of civic technology. And the 6 consortium members include Africtivist and the Gore Institute from Senegal, Code for Africa from South Africa, that is actually represented in various African countries, Democracy Works Foundation from South Africa, and the European Partnership for Democracy, which serves as the secretariat for the consortium, and ECDPM from Brussels, which is a policy think tank that focuses on African Union policy making. Now, within that project consortium, how we try to drive citizen engagement with the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, or the ACDEG, is through a series of activity clusters. We try and enhance digital engagement, which is furthering dialogues on key themes on democratic governance on various digital platforms. We try and promote knowledge sharing on that various digital platforms. We do also have a series of facilities that try to support innovative civic tech projects from civil society organizations or individual activists so that they can either upskill or tap into the potential of civic technology in furthering their advocacy, whether it's at national or continental level. And then we do actually engage in some levels of research with regards to exploring the spaces that exist for civil society engagement with the African governance architecture, both at the continental and regional levels. And then we also very closely associated to that do some series of advocacy initiatives that are aimed at matchmaking policymakers with some of the actors that are involved in democratic governance advocacy across the continent. So furthering dialogues between policymakers and activists, or seeking to engage in the spaces of the African Union, where they are furthering or developing policies around democratic governance. But with that introduction, I will quickly delve into some of the insights we've gotten as a project with regards to the utility of civic technology in furthering youth inclusion. And it does build on the remarks of the African Union envoy, as well as Dr. Kwasi, where they emphasized the centrality of the youth demographic on the continent. But I will just say this, that it feels as though we are currently in a context where there's a broad spectrum of engagement with the youth. On the one end, this demographic is viewed as a huge potential point for the African Union, harnessing the youth bulge, as it's called, could drive the agenda for sustainable development on the continent. It could be the source of an economic boom for the continent if it's sufficiently harnessed from the perspective of policymakers. But then on the other end, the more negative side, this same youth bulge is viewed as a threat to the stability of various societies. So the fact that the huge youth demographics in our various countries is matched with high unemployment rates, poor public service delivery, limited potentials in critical areas such as education and health, then gets a lot of our governments to view the youth as a threat, because as they begin to push back against elements like bad governance, corruption, then we find governments responding to youth agitation for better service delivery and good governance as threats to stability or regime security. But then what we need to do is harness or expand the space for citizen dialogue in terms of what good governance should look like in the continent. And this is why we feel the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, the ACDEG, is a very critical tool, because it does symbolize, I feel, one of the shared values within the African Union that underpins Agenda 2063. Through the ACDEG, our states came together to then say there are certain key principles and standards around good governance, respect for human rights, and rule of law that we must all ascribe to if we're going to ultimately achieve the vision of Agenda 2063. So in that sense, it does have a moral authority as a framework. And then it also, to some elements, becomes justiciable in the sense that if states fail to live up to their obligations, we can then use certain levers to hold them accountable. But then, when we look at the aspect of how we then expand youth engagement to ensure critical values such as the ACDEG are met, we can look to civic technology as a way to bridge the existing gap between the youth and policymakers. And why is that? It's because in a very simple way, civic technology to me can be defined as innovations by the public that would see them use technology to further key principles such as democracy, transparent government, and also people-centered public services. And these three pillars are actually, in essence, what Agenda 2063 is about, because the ultimate vision is to have a people-driven and a people-owned continent. So if we are able to tap into innovations that drive these key pillars, we can be able to bridge the gap of citizen engagement, and particularly the key demographic of the youth. And so within our project, in trying to engage through our different activity clusters, like I mentioned, for example, using grants to support innovative projects, we've seen this work at play in various categories. We've seen very innovative projects or tools developed to further key aspects such as crowd mapping and early warning systems that enable people to track key occurrences within the context of their country, especially in critical times such as elections, where we can be able to see the challenges of potential violence and to be able to require the necessary actors to react in good time, or to be able to forewarn the public of critical dangers that they should then be able to avoid, or even help policymakers prescribe appropriate responses such as conflict prevention measures or conflict mitigation measures. We've also seen civic technology tools or innovations that are driven towards awareness raising and civic mobilization. And just for example, within the context of the Charter Project Africa, we've invested quite a bit in trying to create knowledge resource tools that can help people to greater understand the ACTEG and how it impacts their day-to-day lives. So we do have a massive open online course, for example, that is free open access for anyone to register, subscribe, and learn, where we then break down the ACTEG into a series of key thematic modules, but then hopefully empower various activists and civil society organizations to utilize the ACTEG in their day-to-day advocacy and engagement with their governments at every level. But then beyond that, we also do have a series of interactive tools that we are developing and have developed, like what we call an ACTEG primer that again directly creates a manual that relates civil society's role in actualizing the principles under the ACTEG. And then beyond awareness raising and civic mobilization, there is also tools and innovations that focus on citizen monitoring of public policies. Now here, we've seen quite a few interesting projects that we've managed to support. One of them focuses on synthesizing political commitments within the manifestos that governments develop in the context of campaigns. They're then synthesized into a series of promises that can be tracked. So essentially promise trackers. And through that, you're able to then hold governments accountable in terms of what they promised to deliver when they were campaigning versus the policies they're implementing now that they're in government. Also focusing on the utility and the efficacy of the policies they're actually putting in place. So we have two tools, for example, that have been in place in Zimbabwe through a grantee called Civio Institute. And then one of our grantees in Kenya, Mzalendo Trust, has actually jumped on that and developed a promise tracker in relation to the current Kenyan administration that got into power in 2022. Now, these tools become very important in animating or in getting the public engaged with regards to holding these governments accountable for what they were promised as voters, and also ensuring that voters stay engaged with the governance process beyond just voting days and electoral campaigns. Then beyond that, there's also tools that are focused on open governance and political participation. Now, within this context, these are projects that have been designed to demystify critical governance processes like the lawmaking process. And again, there are examples of these kind of tools and innovations, but one that we have under the support of the Charter Project Africa is a platform that is focused on providing the public with an opportunity to engage with the development of legislation. So if there's a proposed law that is under development in Parliament, this platform uploads the proposed law and invites comments from the public, either by way of detailed memorandums or simply statements that they can put in and will be consolidated within the platform and sent as consolidated memoranda to Parliament to directly impact the legislative process. This is one of those ways that, again, it largely demystifies the legislative process, which, again, you will find a lot of the youth seem to feel is distant from them, or is largely complex because of the parliamentary procedures, or is even very limited in terms of transparency because, not too many people can access a parliamentary Hansard and know that this law is being debated, discussed, or which stage it is at. So within those four pillars, you see that there is very high potential of civic technology being utilized to expand spaces for engagement with policymakers, with policy-making processes, all with the ultimate end of making them more transparent and citizen-driven. So what would you hope to see as positive outcomes? And I would be tapping into the optimism of civic technology in terms of what Dr. Kwasi spoke about. You would then hope to be able to facilitate, strengthen communities. One of the things, for example, we hope to do with the Charter Project Africa is through supporting these different initiatives, having grantees around the continent and being able to amplify the kind of work they're doing. We are hoping to catalyze or inspire a movement that then sees other people try to either replicate or upskill the innovation that some people are already undertaking with regards to getting the citizens engaged in democratic governance. We're also hoping to create a community of practice of sorts. So we are developing a virtual resource center that we hope can be able to curate open access tools around democratic governance, but also become a space where people can engage with existing innovators and share their own ideas and get some level of assistance from those who already walked this road ahead of them. And then we also hope to have increasing government responsiveness to citizen engagement. So that, for example, some of these tools are in fact becoming institutionalized and being recognized as part of a framework for public participation. The legislative platform I mentioned, the one that then allows people to comment on proposed laws, is actually an example that comes from Kenya. And what we have seen over a period of time that this organization has been able to implement that platform is that then members of parliament have consciously recognized and accepted that that is actually a valid platform to solicit and process citizen engagement with regards to their lawmaking processes. So then, hopefully, what you then see is more state entities getting engaged and accepting that civic technology can become a platform through which they can solicit and process public participation, as is required in most of our democratic governance principles at the country level. And then you also want to, very associated with that, build long-lasting frameworks of open government. So for me, the gold standard or the ideal vision would be that then beyond them being civic tech tools, that government then actually begins to incorporate some of these frameworks or the thinking of civic technology within their own models and spaces for public participation. And I will say I have to congratulate the African Union for taking leadership in terms of actually trying to set the stage for civic technology becoming a key component of citizen engagement and people-driven policy making, because through the African Governance Architectures Secretariat, they've actually been able to sponsor initiatives with grants that are targeting youth innovation programs. I think we managed to do 2 cycles of those kind of innovation programs, and have even gone further to begin to articulate a youth innovation strategy for the continent, something that can then provide policy guidance to member states in terms of how they can incorporate civic technology and maximize on youth innovation in that field as a way of not just expanding the economic development component, but also the democratic governance components. And I think it's something that we must continue to encourage and hopefully see replicate at the regional economic community level and also at the national level. But then just to close, I paint a picture of potential and huge opportunities of how to utilize civic technology to boost citizen engagement. But of course, it's not without existing challenges, and some of them have been mentioned by the prior panelists. Beyond the challenge of the imbalanced or imbalanced access to the internet or the digital space, because the reality is when you look at the statistics of the demographics, the reality is we don't have universal access to the internet, and also where you do have access, again, they are class divides, where you could then say the more privileged within society have unfettered access to the internet, and then the underprivileged within society are still struggling to have consistent and sustained access to the internet. And yet we are recognizing that the digital space is becoming a key sphere for public participation and citizen engagement. So obviously we would need to call on our member states to enhance their efforts towards creating greater access to internet connectivity within our respective countries. But then associated with that is the reality that shrinking civic space doesn't only occur in the physical sphere or the physical realm, it also is now taking place within the digital sphere. So the reality of internet shutdowns within close proximity or during elections, the reality of internet shutdowns in the midst of public protests is something we will also have to grapple with. So the campaigns of preserving civic space must concern us both in the physical sphere, but also in the digital sphere. But then also, I do think we would need to have some reflection at the policy level that would see us also come to terms with or update our policies with to be able to address the realities of what it means to have digital civic space. So, for example, the African Charter of Democracy, Elections and Governance, when it was adopted at a time when we didn't have a very strong impact of civic technology and digital engagement within our politics and our public participation when it comes to policy. But now we're dealing with the plus side, as I have mentioned, of how civic technology can expand public engagement, but then also what the threats can be from from technology and digital engagement, like misinformation, disinformation. And we do have to possibly reflect on how we can ensure that a key framework like the ACDEG is updated to effectively engage with this current environment of civic technology and digital engagement. And then lastly, I think we do need to push for reorientation within our policymakers of what the potential of technology and digital engagement really is. I say that because, for example, we do have, again, an African Union policy framework in the form of a digital transformation strategy that looks at the potential of technology and digital engagement in enhancing the socioeconomic development agenda for the continent. It talks about, for example, the employment potential that technology and digital engagement can create. It talks about how we need to preserve the economic assets that reside within the potential of the information and data that we utilize within the context of technology and digital engagement. However, what I do worry about is the relative silence on, again, the potential of technology and digital engagement in enhancing governance. So we do need to have that orientation in our policymakers that then also says we must exploit technology and digital engagement with the perspective of expanding the spaces for citizen engagement and public participation in governance. And so that we don't only have an orientation around economic imperatives, but also an orientation towards expanding fundamental rights and freedoms, and in that pushing for strong public participation and citizen engagement, so that we can truly live up to that vision of a people-driven and a people-owned continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. You can tell that Andrew knows the stuff, and I feel like 10 minutes wasn't sufficient for you to really share everything that the Charter Project has been doing or is doing in the civic technology space. But to the participants, to the panelists, if you want to engage further with Mr. Andrew, you can, I think, reach out on LinkedIn, but he really knows the stuff. I remember there was one time when I wanted to do some research on civic technology, and I went online and I saw an article that Andrew had written. I was like, yeah, this is somebody who really is passionate about, civic technology. So thank you so much. We've taken note of the projects and the initiatives and the tools that the Charter Africa project is doing, and we wish you all the best. We are going to move on. Thanks so much to our speakers. Thanks to the participants for hanging in there. We are about to call our last but not the least speaker. And then from there, we're going to go to questions and answers, where we're going to give the participants the opportunity to unmute themselves and ask questions, as well as we're going to respond to the questions that have been sent already in the chat box. So over to the next speaker, we're going to have Inge Pap, who is the managing editor of the AII, the African Legal Information Institute, and that is based in the University of Cape Town, South Africa. In Inge's current role, she works to advance free online access to both national and regional legal material across Africa. Inge is going to present a very, very useful tool, the AGP platform that holds over 5,000 relevant AU documents. Welcome, Inge, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Sabina, and thank you so much for having us today. I'm very excited to show you all what we have created. But just by way of introduction, so as you mentioned, I am based at the University of Cape Town, and Law.Africa and Africanly are NGOs that work towards publishing the law and legal resources for free, open access to all the citizens of Africa, both their national laws that apply in their own countries, the regional laws that apply in regional economic communities like ECOWAS, and African Union laws that apply to everyone on the continent. And the theory of change is that when people and citizens are informed about the law, they will be empowered to engage with their justice systems, with the organs that implement the law, and that will improve transparency, and it will improve the independence of the judiciary, and it will improve the rule of law overall. So I'm going to show you the website that we developed in partnership with Afrobarometer and the rest of the Data Governance Alliance. So this is agp.africanly.org. It's, I don't know if you can see the URL. So it's agp.africanli.org. And it is our resource hub for all things African Union. So at the moment, as you can see there, we have 6,949 documents, and these have all been carefully researched and annotated and put into their own little collections. They include legal instruments. So that's the hard statutes, the charters and treaties and protocols and things that tell us what our rights are and what the rules are by which the different regional bodies operate. Then we have judgments from regional African courts and also from AU level courts like the African Courts on Human and People's Rights, so that you can see exactly how these courts are actually implementing the law, what kinds of judgments they are giving that are making real changes to ordinary people's lives. We also have soft law, so that is the policies, guidelines, recommendations, statements, anything that is not necessarily legally binding, but that helps to illustrate the policy context in which these laws are being made and implemented. And then we also have some gazettes from the regional economic communities. So I'm just going to quickly show you a few of the main sort of features of the site that you may find interesting. First of all, we realize that a lot of people in the African continent do not use the internet on a laptop or a computer, but rather use it on their phones. So we've tried to make sure as much as is possible that the site is mobile friendly. We have also made it available in multiple languages. So on the right top corner, you'll see a little menu. If you want to switch over to French, for example, you just select the language and the main sort of text of the site switches over to that language. The search feature here in the middle of the homepage is the main thing. So using this search feature, you can search across all of these documents, but not only that, you can also get results from national justice systems. So for example, if I search for children's rights and just hit search, I have found documents, almost 10,000 documents. And you can use these filters on the left-hand side to sort of filter through whichever country you want to look at, or whether you want to look at African regional bodies. And you'll see, for example, here is a judgment from Tanzania from 2020. There is one from Zimbabwe. Here's one from an African regional body that is, of course, the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So you can use these filters to look at the jurisdiction that you want, the document type. You can look at different courts, court registries. You can even focus in on a specific judge, if that is what you're interested in doing. And you can look at the different, you can filter by years. So that is the quick sort of search method of approaching the website. The other thing that a person might want to do is focus on a specific organ. So if you are in West Africa and you want to know some more about ECOWAS, you can just click on that collection there from the homepage, and here you'll be able to see, okay, we have documents from 2013, all the way back to 1979, different types of documents, and you can search by alphabetical order and so on. I am going to use the Youth Charter to show you a few other features because it is the most appropriate charter that I can find for today. So we have some documents that are available in multiple languages. The Youth Charter is one of them. Have it available in English and French. So you can switch over to the language version that you want from the menu there. We also have a contents kind of table on the side. So instead of having to scroll through the entire thing, I'm just switching back to English. So instead of having to scroll through the entire thing and jump straight to this article on youth participation, for example, if that's the one you're interested in. We also have definitions that show up when you hover your mouse over a particular word. The definition of that word as it appears in the charter will pop up. So you don't have to keep scrolling back up and down to see the definitions of different terms. One other feature that I think I can use the Children's Rights Charter to show you is where some documents are related to one another. So let me just see. So in some cases, you have one document that interprets another one, or that summarizes another one, or implements another one. Okay, my internet is a little bit slow at the moment. I must apologize. Okay, so here you can see the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child has got 7 documents that are related to it. So you can jump straight to those related documents and see, okay, so this charter is authoritatively interpreted in this general comment from the Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and those kinds of things. These relationships are also highlighted in the body of the text, so you'll see it popping up on the side there. So this should be useful for someone who wants to see authoritatively what the law says about a particular issue, and engage with the organs that are actually there to help us to assert our rights and help us to bring issues to the attention of the bodies that are actually mandated to help us. So this is the website. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about it, but in the meantime, I encourage you to please go and check it out, have a look, have a browse. If you have any feedback to us, please go to the About page and use the Get in Touch form to get in touch with us. We're always open to any feedback. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ingi, for that very brief but elaborate presentation. I think this is a really good webinar, that we are not just talking and talking, but we have, resources such as this where people can go to for more information in any area that they are interested in. And that brings us to the end of our speaker schedule. Thank you very much for hanging in there. Thanks to the attendees. I think this has been a very, very useful, very interesting conversation. And you know that's interesting when the number, the total number of attendees is at a constant. You know, we don't have a lot of people dropping out. So I think everybody's learning something. So without wasting much of your time, we still have a few minutes to the end of the webinar. We are going to go straight into questions and answers. And we have several questions in the chat box. I think we are going to go through that in the next 10 minutes, and then we'll give roughly 5 to 10 minutes for a few people to, unmute themselves and share with us, because we really want to hear from you. So what I would do is I'm going to summarize the questions, and in the events where will probably pick speakers, or speakers can opt to answer the questions. I'll kindly plead with all the speakers to share their videos, put on their videos. Okay, okay, I think we're good, and if possible, mute themselves. We are going to start from the top, and I'll plead with the speakers to answer the questions in 1 minute. So I'm a Twitter fanatic, so put at the back of your mind that you are making a 128 character tweets, and so just put the point and hit the mark, and we'll move on to the next question. Thanks for understanding. The first question is from Izire Gilen. I think this question is to the youth end for Her Excellency Chido. Gillian wants to know how what you expect from us as African youth, so that we can start from that and make practical actions towards the goal. So I guess they want to understand what we as African youth can expect from you. Over to you, Chido.
Thank you very much, Sabina, and thank you to our panelists for such an insightful presentations that you've made. So just to answer the question, I would say is we have to be present as young people, and the way that we can be present is, number one, in doing our research. Often we find that there's so much information like what has been shared in terms of what is happening, as well as Agenda 2063 and opportunities that are available. And it needs us as young people as well, in terms of playing our part in doing their own research in, what is affecting us and as Africa and its development. I'll also concretely give an example specifically in terms of, an initiative that's been happening at the African Union, and that's the African Union Media Fellowship. And the Media Fellowship really was to enhance, when it comes to how we narrate our story as Africa, specifically from the view of the media, and making sure that we narrate our own story as Africa. And within this Media Fellowship, we've had a number of young people. This is through a partnership, with our Department of Communication, as well as GIZ, where we had young people coming in the forefront, and taking part as part of this fellowship, but not only doing so, but having an opportunity to also participate in some of the events that we got to participate in as Office of the Youth Envoy, so that they could report from a perspective of, Africa, and be able to really tell a narrative. Secondly, not only that, but, we've had a lot of calls out for different initiatives on how you can get involved in the office. I'm sure some of you might have seen in terms of the Youth Reference Committee that we will be creating. And this is really an opportunity for young people to get involved more in our work, as well as, make contributions with regards to policy recommendations, as well as the papers that we'll be presenting at decision-making tables. Lastly, I'll touch on something that's actually about to go up on our social media pages just as we get off this webinar, and this is regards to our second Humanitarian Youth Forum, which will be happening in Madagascar, and we'll be making a call out for African Union youth delegates on humanitarian action to be able to participate, not only just for us to sit down and attend these events and come up with papers alone, but just from last year in the Head of State humanitarian meeting, there was a decision for an AU humanitarian agency. And we really want young people to get involved in terms of, the consultancy work that's going on at the moment, which will also lead into the concrete recommendations and the action towards the execution and, the start of this humanitarian agency. So just to name a few, we can always take this offline in terms of how we get involved, but let us participate. Most importantly, let us collaborate. And lastly, let us just work together and do our research to ensure that we really build the Africa that we want collectively.
Thank you very much, Chido. Thanks so much for answering that question elaborately. Chido went way above 428 characters, So yeah, we're going to continue. This question is for Oswald. Oswald, Caleb wants to know, what challenges do you see in implementing technology solutions to improve democracy in Africa, and how does the company address these challenges? 128 characters, Oswald, over.
Okay, thank you. One of the main challenges is the government structures themselves and the government agencies' mode of operation. And the thing is, that people in the agencies have been used to working in a certain way. And when you present solutions, especially digital solutions that provide a lot of value in terms of being able to make things faster and more accessible, it's met with a lot of resistance. One of the main reasons is the natural thing of people being distrustful of technology that they are not used to. For example, mobile money did not catch on for a very long time until people got used to it. They felt that their money was somewhere in the atmosphere. Their money wasn't tangible, so they couldn't accept it. But after a while, people accepted that way of doing things. The second reason, which we are all aware of, is high levels of corruption, which will be strongly affected by the introduction of digital systems. And because of that, people have personal resistance towards certain things. And these are some of the things that we have identified, but we are working very hard and making sure that we provide value to people and provide value to the organizations, because if we are able to demonstrate that this will help you to achieve everything you need to achieve much faster than you need to achieve it, this will help you to save on your cost of implementation. This will help you to reach more people than you are accustomed to reaching and have a stronger impact. Then as we go along, it gets adopted. And we've seen people easing up and allowing us more access to government data, more access to government information, onboarding more services as we go along. And one thing we've realized is that once we have a number of agencies and services on our platforms, we get even more because there is a social proof of the solution working. And once people are able to see that, then we are able to get their acceptance and their buy-ins. Thank you.
Thank you very much as well. Thanks for that. We're going to move on. Anonymous attendees asking is very clever, by the way. If we're going to receive the recording of this video, yes, we will share that to you in a newsletter. Hussein, I appreciate your question, but because of the theme and the topic, we are not going to go into this, but please feel free to reach out to any of the speakers and ask your question to them. Anonymous attendee again is asking, are youth apathetic and disengaged, or have they turned to different forms of participation? Because his experience in South Africa is that you find that formal processes are alienating and not meeting their needs. They therefore choose to work in informal spaces, including online and social media advocacy. I think, just to quickly answer this, I think Andrew spoke briefly about it in his presentation when he said that the youth bulge is seen as a threat, and that is very unfortunate, but we'll keep, engaging the young people. We're going to harness conversations, intergenerational conversations with young people and make policies more people-centered. And I think that this is going to solve the problem. So youth are not apathetic and disengaged, in the words of anonymous attendee. Moving on, there's Akena Julie. Well, I'm very thrilled by the conversation. Thank you very much for your positive feedback. And their humble question is, how do we get involved in this very motion that is very paramount at the grassroots level? Texting from Uganda. So I'd assume that Julie wants to know how they can engage young people in civic technology? I think Andrew had answered that, but Andrew, is there anything you want to say? Maybe 30 seconds to this question? How do we get involved in this motion in the civic engagement? Uganda, 30 seconds, please.
Sorry, my apologies. I was actually responding to some of the questions through the answer function on the process to circumvent your 100-word limit. But what was the question on civic engagement, please?
So I think Julie is asking how can they, the youth in Uganda, get involved in civic technology at the grassroots level?
I think basically one of the key ways to do it is to try and reach out and engage with some of those who are already working on civic tech platforms, and how then you can make connections between the work they're doing and the work you're doing, the important work that's being done in terms of advocacy at the grassroots level. Because one of the things I do feel bears the greatest potential for civic technology is close collaboration and coordination, so that the burden or the resource intensive aspect of coming up with a civic tech tool is not one that is carried individually. So I do know, for example, there are very strong Ugandan institutions that are leading innovation on civic technology. I believe one institution called SEMA is one of them, that is actually an awardee within the African Union's innovative project strategies of the past, and is also even currently a beneficiary of the African Union Civic Tech Fund. So the quick answer is to connect, but then what the Charter Project Africa is trying to do with its initiative is to create a platform that makes those kind of connections easier. So we hope by the end of our project, which is in 2 years, to be able to have established a database that people can quickly go to and find out who are some of the civic tech innovators very close to them within their home countries or within their localities. And even because it's a digital engagement, they don't have to be from your home country, who can help you navigate the questions around how civic technology can impact your local work. So hopefully we'll be able to create an ecosystem that responds to these questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Thanks for that. We're going to go to the next question. Julius Onia is asking about unreachable people. So by this, I mean probably people who don't have access to maybe the internet, and what's the plan for them to achieve this goal, or people in fragile states, who knows? And Dr. Patrick, is there anything you can maybe share? How do you think that the people, for example, in fragile states can achieve the goal of including young people in the political engagement? 30 seconds, please.
No worries at all. I believe in collaboration. I believe in relational activities. How do young people in fragile settings work? And when it comes to fragile settings, the key takeaway or the key factors we often pay attention to include the political framework within which they operate and the kind of opportunities and challenges available. And some of these challenges, in a new patrimonial sense, you think of elite co-optation of these spaces. So in order for young people to really be included, we need to address these challenges, either capacity challenges or elite interference challenges. And for African Union, for example, you can play that leadership role of ensuring that leaders stick to some of the policies that they've ratified. And then from the bottom, supporting CSO organizations such as FactSpace, Shahidi, like the various ones, coordinate all of them, and then embolden them, and also help protect them in a sense so that they can effectively engage in these spaces. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Patrick. We're moving on. K. Abo Ayi, sorry, please forgive my pronunciation. Summary is asking how Africa seeks to achieve the 2063 strategy, and what is the AU doing to ensure political leaders are committed to implementing the AU Youth Charter. Because I work in the Office of the Youth Envoy, I'm going to quickly answer this question. So as the Youth Envoy indicated, one of the huge responsibilities is making sure that heads of states, first of all, ratify the AU Youth Charter, and by ratifying it, they are agreeing to the policies that are in the Youth Charter. Very recently, in February, during the Heads of States Summit, we had the President of Burundi who ratified, signed it, and presented it. And I think that some work is being done in making sure that the heads of state ratify and are held to the policies in the African Youth Charter. And we're going to go over to, I see people, some of our participants are sharing their contact information. Thank you very much. If you have very specific questions, you can reach out to the Office of the Youth Envoy. I believe the email address is in the social media handle. Israel has a very long question, but I think this is a question to the Youth Envoy. It says that, will the AU Youth Envoy participate in the process of, okay. I don't think it's a very relevant question for the subjects that we are discussing right now. Okay, so this question goes to Dominic. Dominic, Felicity is thanking you for the really interesting presentation, and they are asking, what reason do you think explains the democratic deficit, and why do you think you have lost confidence in democracy? Is that something you can talk to?
I can touch on it, but it's something, I mean, it's a very complicated issue that I don't think that I can answer in a tweet. But one of the things that I will say is that the experiences of democracy across the continent are so varied that speaking as a whole is quite challenging. But I mean, one of the things that we can say is that by looking at the unemployment data, that could be one of the reasons why the democracy has not serviced the youth in the way that we have been told that it would, with such a large proportion of young Africans wanting jobs, looking for jobs, but not necessarily having access to that, and being exposed to or needing to confront unresponsive governments and political leaders in the process, can definitely lead to that disenfranchisement by many young people on the continent. But I will sort of hand it over to any other colleagues who'd like to add to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominic. We want to, Bauer is commending the African Union Office of the Youth Envoy and Edzifeji for organizing this webinar. Thank you so much, and says thanks for awareness creation on your mandate and engaging the youth. Christopher is asking if we're going to have the speaker presentation via participants' emails. Yes, you will get all this information because they are. We have, sorry, the participants, if I skip your questions, it's not because I don't see it. It's, since we're working against time, I'm trying to find questions that tie into the subject matter for today. Israel is asking, out of 10 countries in the world where majority of citizens don't have access to internet, African nations make up 5 of them. How could technology be representative? How could the same be mitigated to ensure African youth participation in democracy through technology? Okay, so just to quickly answer your question, Israel, I think there's a serious challenge with internet infrastructure. Only about half of the Africa's population is able to access the internet, which is a problem in 2023. So our hope and the work that we're doing is to make sure that we're closing this digital divide by advocating for or hoping for more investments as far as internet infrastructure is concerned. I hope I've answered your questions. Okay. Moapi is asking, how do you see the public sector digital transformation play a key role in community development? Does anyone want to take this question, or should I randomly pick somebody? How do we see the public sector digital transformation play a key role in community development?
If I may?
Yeah, sure, please.
Just very quickly, that's what I touched on when I was emphasizing the issue of reorientation of where our policymakers are. I think the way to make it beneficial to community development is to make it demand-driven rather than supply-driven. And by that I mean, we do have a lot of initiatives around digital transformation that literally come from, not from the citizens themselves in terms of the aspirations of what they want to improve, but more of what people want to harness, what certain key investors want to harness out of the communities. And so that's what I was saying when it feels like, for example, our digital transformation strategies are more driven towards economic imperatives in terms of how can we tap into markets, how can we tap into the economic potential of the public we're engaging, rather than what do our public really need. So the way to make it more responsive is to have a policy orientation within our digital transformation strategies that actually tap into what the people's needs are, and also expanding it beyond economic imperatives to also look at key democratic governance principles, like how can we use digital transformation to increase participation, how can we use it to make policies more people-centric and not just dollars and cents in terms of what profits can be made out of digital transformation.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your insightful comments. Thanks for the questions that you have put in the chat box. Unfortunately, because of time, and I really don't want to keep you here beyond 2 hours, I would plead your indulgence to get in touch with the speakers. I believe all of them are on LinkedIn. You can get in there, get to message them and let them know, that you took part in the conversation, and I'm sure they're going to answer your questions. We're going to give a few minutes, 2 minutes max, to Nyasha to kindly share your video and give us closing remarks, because we have just a few minutes to the end of the conversation. Over to you, Nyasha.
Hi, Sabina. Can you not see me? Okay, it's fine. So I've got a very short job to do. I'm going to give a vote of thanks. So I want to say thank you to everyone who has joined us today for this webinar that has been hosted by our project, Data for Governance Alliance, and the Office of the Youth Envoy. We hope you found the information and insights that has been shared by our speakers to be valuable and thought-provoking. So as we continue to work towards building a more inclusive and equitable Africa, it is important that we recognize the unique perspectives and contributions of young people through collaboration and dialogue. We can create new opportunities and drive positive change that benefits everyone. So we encourage you to stay engaged with our organizations and to continue to support efforts that empower young people and promote digital inclusion. I thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to continuing this important conversation in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nyasha, and a personal thank you to you as well for really working hard behind the scenes, and to the rest of the D4G team, as well as the Office of the Youth Envoy team, for making sure that this is a reality. And just on behalf of the rest of the participants, we want to encourage you to, make this in person. We're past the COVID stage, and we really like to get together and share more, maybe over a few days, and talk and really learn and get to experience the projects and the things that you're working on. So that is going to be my recommendation. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to our amazing speakers. It's been an incredible 2 hours with you. Let's stay connected. Thank you so much. Over and out.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.